let's talk about forgiveness. Because I think that one of the most painful and heaviest parts of healing from emotional pain is forgiveness. And I think it takes a great deal of heavy lifting. And so I want to kind of talk about that. Why is forgiveness important for emotional healing? Because there's some people out there that are just angry that I'm even bringing it up because it's like, I'm not going to forgive them. And it's like, okay, but why is forgiving important? And this is to whatever. It might be forgiving yourself. It might be forgiving someone that hurt you. Might be forgiving the situation. But there's a lot of avenues of forgiveness.
Well, I think it's important because when we choose not to forgive, we just get stuck. I always kind of like it. We get stuck in the moment or the thing that hurt us. We can't really, it's hard to move past it. You guys remember CDs? Most people don't have those anymore.
I'm too young.
But you remember that? But the CDs, I don't know if you guys remember that, but they would get a scratch on them.
Yeah.
And you would hear the same note.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 you know what I mean? And that's when you choose to forget, when you choose not to forgive someone, you stay stuck in the same note.
Mm-hmm.
That is the hurt that they caused you. And you're the one who's stuck. Here's what's crazy. They've moved on. They've moved on. Yeah. Sometimes they don't even know they did anything, but let's say that they did. I remember when I was in college, and it was graduation ceremony. It was like practice, rehearsal. Okay. And we were getting ready for it. And I had just 2 weeks before that gotten a letter from the state that the person who did the abuse to me, where he had gone to prison. And this was 7.5 years later, I think, after trial and all that. And so he served, I think he got 20 years or something like that sentence. He served 7.5. And I got a letter from that state saying, just so you know, he's getting out of prison. I think they were required to inform me or something like that. Anyways, so that kind of messed with me. Wow. That brought up a bunch of stuff. And by the way, that's another principle of healing is just because you've worked through it, there may be something else that happens in your life that you got to deal with it again. You got to address it. Anyways, that brought up stuff. So I was at that rehearsal, graduation rehearsal, and I looked out and I thought I saw him in the crowd. And so I froze up and I went to the bathroom, and there was my bathroom moment.
I was going to say, it's always the bathroom.
It's always the bathroom. You always run into the bathroom.
Safe place.
Yeah. But I kind of, at one point though, I was in the bathroom for like 6-7 minutes. And then I was like, what am I doing here? Why am I locked up in this bathroom? I don't even know if that's him. So I kind of got up the courage and I walked straight up to the guy, and it wasn't him, of course. But here's the point. See, he's moved on. I don't know what he was doing that day, but I was in the bathroom locked up. And that's what happens when we hold on. We refuse to let the person go. We refuse to let them off the hook for what they did to us. We get stuck in the bathroom, stuck in the same note, and they're on a beach somewhere. Look, they're fine. We're the ones who are suffering from it. And so you ask the fundamental question, like, why? That ultimately is one reason. Second reason, if you are a follower of Jesus, so look, if you're listening to this and you're not a follower of Jesus, I certainly have no authority in your life. You haven't given Jesus authority in your life. So take it for whatever you want. But if you are a follower of Jesus, you don't get to pick and choose what being a follower of Jesus means. And he told us at one point, to forgive as I have forgiven you. Okay. So I believe that all my sins have been, all the debt that I owe God, and it's a ton, it's unfathomable, has been forgiven through the grace and the work of Jesus Christ on the cross. So for me then to withhold that from anyone, and we'll talk about what forgiveness looks like, probably we should talk about what that means in a minute. But that's that's what's the word? Making light of what I've been given. So it's almost like, how can I receive it and I refuse to even think about giving it to someone else? So the more you get in touch with how much grace and forgiveness you need in your life, I don't want to say easier. I hesitate saying easier, but the more viable forgiving someone else becomes. At the end of the day, man, all sin is like separated us from God. So anyways,
that's Jace. And I think that I love it. I don't know why this visual came to me, but it's almost like when we don't forgive someone, it's like we chain ourselves to them.
Yeah, they're
in a very metaphorical way. We actually chain ourselves to this person, to that damage, to the whatever it is, and forgiveness is actually setting ourselves free. But I think there's a lot of people that have some misconceptions about forgiveness. They assign what forgiveness must be, should be, and they're not saying no to forgiveness. They're saying no to things that is not a part of forgiveness.
Yeah.
They say things like, "I can't forgive them. I can never look at that person again."
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
But yeah, sometimes I think we confuse like forgiveness with reconciliation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what are some misconceptions you guys have heard about with forgiveness that is probably stopping people from experiencing the freedom of forgiveness?
Well, I'd say it 3 ways. Forgiveness is not these 3 things. So when the scriptures talk about forgiveness, when we talk, I think in this conversation we're talking about forgiveness, this is what we're not what we're talking about. Forgiveness is not once and done. So sometimes people say forgive and forget. I'm never forgetting what happened to me. So that's ridiculous. I shouldn't forget, by the way, what happened to me. Like, that'd be silly. So it's not once and done. It's not forgive and forget. So you can forgive someone and still very much remember what they did to you. And so that's one thing. Second thing is forgiveness is a process. So you may forgive someone today, and then a week later, you find yourself just as angry and all that. That doesn't mean you didn't forgive them a week before. That means you're normal, and it's come back up again. And so I've had to, multiple seasons of my life, when I first had kids, I had to forgive all over again because I had all this fear start kind of, when my kids hit teenage years, I had to forgive all over again. When Jenny and I got married and, we wrestled through the intimacy, I had to forgive all over again. So that doesn't mean I didn't forgive him before that. Mm-hmm. So it's a process. That's okay. And give yourself grace with that. And secondly, and the last thing is, Joanna, you hit this. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. Those are 2 different things, 2 totally different topics. You can forgiveness is we should define what forgiveness is here probably in a second too, but forgiveness is fundamentally a posture of your heart. Reconciliation is when you restore the relationship. You can forgive someone without having the relationship restored. Some people are toxic. Some people are destructive, and you should not be reconciled to them. Doesn't mean you don't forgive them. So here's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is when there's a debt owed to you and you choose to absorb the debt. That's what forgiveness is, which is why forgiveness is painful. So it could be really simple. Someone broke your trust. Okay? They owe you for that. So there's a debt owed to you now. So forgiveness is you saying, I absorb that debt. I'm not going to be the one to go and have to make them pay me back, which half the time is impossible. How does someone...
They can't give you back what has been taken.
They can't give that back to you half the time. How could he ever give me back what was taken? Yeah. So forgiveness is anytime someone takes something from you, whether that's they took your parking spot at the mall, or they took your trust, or they took your time and wasted it, or they took whatever. It's when they're taking something and there's a debt owed now. And you choose to absorb the debt that's owed. That's what it fundamentally is. That's why forgiveness is painful.
Wow.
But you let that go. Last things, forgiveness is not, how do I say this one? Forgiveness is not letting them off the hook to face the consequences of what they did. See, we face this one big time with our church, because we press charges. We had some people really warped people say, well, if you forgave them, you wouldn't press charges.
This was the church you grew up in.
Yeah, this is the church I was at. It's like, whoa, you don't understand forgiveness. That's justice.
Mm.
And that's a totally different thing. I can forgive him. I choose not to. I will absorb. He can never pay me back for those years that he took and the trust and all that kind of stuff. But he needs to face the consequences of his actions through the injustice that was done. That's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
So you can pursue justice while having a heart that said, I'm not going to be the one to make them pay for that.
Can you forgive someone far away? Like can you forgive someone without contact with them?
Well, we have to, because some people did stuff to us and they're passed away now. So how do you move forward with that? Well, the way you move forward with that is, again, you go, God, they owe me for what they did to me. It's wrong. By the way, forgiveness in and of itself is calling out something as evil and wrong, right? Because sometimes people are like, well, if I forgive, I'm not letting them face what they did. It's like, that's not, no. Forgiveness, the very nature of forgiveness, because how else can you forgive someone that you haven't said what you did was evil and wrong and bad? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the very act is itself an act of justice, because you're saying that was unacceptable. So you call that out by saying, I have to forgive the person who wronged me, and I absorb the debt that they owed. I let them off of that, and I allow you, Jesus. You're the one who can take care of the justice stuff.
Because I think if everyone hearing, forgiveness is the gift we give ourselves in a many very real ways. It's freeing ourselves. It's freeing ourselves from having that owed to us, or the harm that was done to us. And I love that it's if it's a parent that hurt you, if it's someone from your past or someone currently, it's not condoning, and it's not celebrating the relationship, and it's not restoring the relationship in many situations, but it is just it's a mental, heart, spiritual thing that doesn't have to require you seeing the person ever again.
It might, but it doesn't have to. That's between you and God. Of like, I mean, because again, so if Jenny says something that I interpret as harsh, it's like, well, no, that you need to be reconciled. like there's levels. So I want to make sure that we don't,
yeah,
because I might be holding that against her now, and I just made that up, but I'm just saying, like, I could be holding that against her now. I need to be reconciled.
And it's also about like,
I'm talking about harm. I'm talking about harm.
Because I also think forgiveness is like, sometimes I like to look at forgiveness as like lifting 1,000 pounds, or put it more realistic perspective, like lifting 300 pounds. I can't lift 300 pounds.
It's just as unrealistic for me.
You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't lift 300 pounds, but I could lift 20, and I could maybe, in a year, lift more and lift more and lift more. And maybe someday, with a lot of lifting, I could lift 300 or close to 300. And I think that for a lot of people, forgiveness is like telling them lift 300 pounds, and the expectation is, well, I can't. It's like, no, you can't, but you can lift a little. And then maybe tomorrow you can lift a little more, and then you'll lift less the next day because something happens and you're healing. But like, you'll never lift 300 pounds by not trying to lift anything. And it takes a time. And maybe someday you fully forgive this person, but it doesn't happen right away.
And I think God honors that. God knows, man, he knows our pain so much more deeply than we even do. And I think God honors, he sees your heart. Even if you're like, hey, God, the only thing I can muster today is I don't want to go hit them with my car right now. It's like, okay, that's a step.
Yeah.
Like, I see that.